welcome to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Miguel Fernandez, co-founder and CEO at Capchase. Thanks for joining me, Miguel.
Thank you, Jesse. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on here. This full disclosure to the people watching, this is our first conversation, so we're just going to kind of see how it goes, and ready to have some fun and learn more about you, Miguel. So,
Great.
do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and your career to date?
Yeah. So, well, I'm co-founder and CEO at Capchase. Before that, I worked in consulting for a couple of years, working mostly, well, in management consulting, mostly for large telco companies, banks, and retail companies. And then I joined a software business where I was the first salesperson and ended up growing the sales team and leading the sales team and the internationalization of the business. So that was my first kind of like touch point with point of sale friction, where every single buyer wanted to pay on a monthly or quarterly basis, and we wanted to get paid up front to recover our fixed costs. So yeah, that was a problem that stuck with me. Then went to business school, went to Harvard Business School, where I met one of my co-founders and started Capchase midway through with that, with the goal of solving that same point of sale friction that I talked about, right? So how can we make it easier for buyers to purchase products, pay those products in installments, and then make sure the vendors are collecting all the contract value upfront. So we're very focused on software as kind of like the first markets where we're solving that pain. And then the market started pulling us towards doing more and more longer term. So going from 12 all the way up to 60 months, and then going from just software to software and hardware bundles. So think of it as like telematics, fleet management, surveillance cameras, robotics, and so on. And then, like more and more so to just hardware and equipment, right? So we've gone through a journey of starting with software, then doing software and hardware, then doing hardware, then equipment, and like the combination of all of those. And yeah, we've been growing really nicely, and we've been international from the get-go. So working in the US, Canada, and Europe, which is great for some of the vendors that we work with.
Sure. Makes complete sense. However, that opens up a whole other layers of complexity, especially from a software perspective. I think of like some of the provinces and the Canadian, like this is French requirements up there in like the Montreal area, and it's how do we get the software to it's in the software space for 10 plus years, so understand some of that.
No, it's like it's true. Like now you mention it, just like every time we've looked at a new market to expand, there's always like this framework that we use to analyze whether it makes sense or not. And it's typically, you have the size of the markets on the one hand, and then you have like competition, regulatory framework, localization needs, and all this stuff. And it's kind of like, okay, so what is more in each case? So for example, like we've been able to enter some markets like UK and Ireland very quickly. And Ireland is not that big, right? But it's just like easy from when looking at that framework. And others that are pretty big, like Germany or France, we've stayed out of for now because the regulation and the localization needs are huge, right? So like you totally get it, yeah.
And it's that juice worth the squeeze, like and then once you finally get it dialed in, they're gonna make something else up, and then you have to make it.
Exactly.
Canada's not that bad though.
No.
At least the taxes are a lot easier than the States.
Yeah.
So let's talk Capchase. So how long has the company been around? I know you just mentioned you go after software, hardware, but just kind of give a little more background if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we've been around about 5 years. We started with a slightly different product than what we are doing today. We started with a working capital product for software businesses. So effectively, recognizing that friction at the point of sale. Like if you think about it, a vendor can either offer flexible payment terms to a buyer, and if the vendor is using their own balance sheet, then they're playing bank, or they can force the buyer to pay up front, but then the buyer is playing bank, right? So we're solving that problem at the point of sale by providing working capital to the vendor. right? And allowing the buyer to pay in whichever way they wanted. And then over time, we shifted towards providing financing to the buyer to purchase the vendor's product. So we've been around for 5 years. We've done about 1.5 billion in financing, and we have our own balance sheet. So it's since the very beginning. Like we've always had our own balance sheet, and we've gone, in a journey from working with private credit funds, working with banks and asset managers, investment banks, and so on. So yeah, we've decided to be a balance sheet business from the very beginning because of all the flexibility and user experience that provides. Um, and yeah, it's kind of like in our DNA basically. And that working capital product is no longer the main product of the business. Now it's all equipment financing, which we are very excited about. It's a much larger industry. We are very comfortable with the advantage that tech provides us against the traditional incumbents. And yeah, generally we're really excited about the reaction that our vendors have when they see the tool, right? Oh, perhaps, like I've been talking about vendors all the time. We are very vendor centric, which means that our go-to-market is through vendors. We embed ourselves in the vendors, and the vendors, when they're selling and then when they're quoting the products, they embed our financing terms into the sales process.
Perfect. Yeah, I could definitely see where, starting with working capital is good, right? It's your entry into the marketplace, but on the EF side, it's kind of where you want to be.
Yeah,
More opportunities.
exactly. Exactly.
And
Way
then
bigger, way bigger space. Yeah.
so no direct uh sales team, just more vendor focused.
Yeah. So our team, we have a sales team, but our sales team is primarily focused on engaging
Finding
vendors.
finding the vendors and vendor
Exactly.
relationships, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Got it.
And then
Got it.
I guess like what has enabled us to grow so quickly is that instead of being one of many financing partners that a vendor has when trying to offer financing terms to their customers, um, we embed our tool uh,
Yeah.
anywhere where a seller lives within a vendor, right? So we become a widget in their CRM if they have one, or we become an AI agent in their email or in their internal communication platform like Slack or Microsoft Teams via text, right? So anytime that seller has a deal or is working on a deal, negotiating with a buyer, they can very
Mhm.
quickly get a qualification, get the documentation, embed
Mhm.
financing terms in a quote, and so on, without having to wait for a third party to process it. And that has allowed us to become really embedded. So we have daily users, right, in our tool. And the SLAs, how quickly we can get to a seller on a deal, is sub 15 minutes, right? So that's kind of like our edge to start working with them and then becoming the trusted partner for the day activities.
Yeah, it's big. From a ticket size perspective, like what
Mhm.
is your average size of a transaction that you guys do?
Average, I mean, like we fall squarely in the mid-ticket category. So average
Uh,
is a little bit above 100 grand. We can go as low as 2.5 depending on the state, and then we can go as high as a couple million. But
uh,
our sweet spot is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per transaction.
sure. Okay. Thank you. Always kind of curious to see where people dabble there.
Yeah,
So you're in New York. Is Are you guys a remote company, or where
yeah.
else do you have offices?
We are a hybrid company, I would say. So we have there's about 90 people in the team, and we have
Uh,
offices in New York, in San Francisco, and in Madrid and Barcelona in Spain. So basically, we
uh,
have our engineering team in Spain, and then well, mostly in Spain, and then yeah, and then we have people in other parts of the world as well. So we have a few offices, we have people that are in different places, but we work as just one team.
cool. Thanks for sharing, and congrats. 5 years, 1.5 billion. That's
Yeah,
sizable, man. So
yeah,
especially if you're on that 100 grand a pop, you know, you
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
put some throughput on that system. So
Right. I think the key is that we start working with vendors and then we become a very big part of their operations, right? So we have vendors that are doing 40, 50 million a year with us.
uh,
So
uh,
I mean, and yeah, that's comprised of thousands of clients on their end, but
yeah,
you know, like
yeah,
that's the way we've been able to grow, kind of like riding alongside some very large vendors with great product market fit.
sure, sure. And I'm sure they appreciate it too, because it just pushes their
Yeah,
hardware, right? Especially if you
yeah,
got the financing behind it. So it's
exactly.
big.
And typically, what they tell us is that they see this not only as a working capital tool, but you know, as a tool to close more deals, close them faster, increase the average order size, increase repeat customers, right? So it's all about like taking friction out of the sales process
Sure,
without you know needing to give in on working capital.
sure, sure. I mean, it's a good backup plan to have just in
Yeah,
case. But
yeah.
yeah. Awesome. And then there was a recent acquisition that you guys made. Do you mind kind of just walking us through that and what it means to the organization?
Yeah. So recently acquired Vartana, which is a similar company to Capchase. They are also a tech-enabled player in the equipment financing space. And the rationale behind that is that, you know, it's like an amazing team with an amazing tech platform and, you know, a very tough competitor to beat. So we just figured that, hey, like if we were to work together as opposed to competing against each other, we would be the only the only party
Oh,
in the whole space that has tech that embeds in a vendor sales process in like truly embeds in a vendor sales process. So yeah, that was the whole origin of the deal, and then we closed last week, and now we're partnering together and extremely excited about what's coming next. Yeah.
perfect. Were they in like I guess global as well as an organization?
No, they're primarily focused in the US and Canada.
Okay.
But they've been working for 5 years in the equipment financing space. They are extremely knowledgeable and talented, and they
Sure.
are bringing, you know, we're kind of like bring the best of both worlds, right? So, you know, we're getting the best out of the two platforms, the best out of, you know, the programs that we're each working with, being able to have a larger balance sheet and more scale and lower cost of capital,
Mm,
right? So like the obvious scale advantages. And then, but what I think is the most interesting part is that yeah, now we are really the only party that has tech. There's like a tech first
yeah.
player. So yeah, we're excited about what that means, you know, and I think it's not gonna be the last acquisition that we do because yeah, we see that when we deploy our tech within a vendor, we can solve so many problems for that vendor that we end up getting a very large share of wallet of all the financing they do or of all the financing they
Okay.
offer, you know? So yeah, we see that, hey, we partner up with more equipment financing companies, we can turn them into multiples larger than what they are today by deploying our tech. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Do you have any like preferred types of organizations you like to partner with or vendor relationships?
With vendors, yeah, we typically work with, I mean, with a ton of cybersecurity companies
Uh,
that are doing 3 to 5 year deals, you know, typically selling either into SLED or into just like normal small and medium companies.
sure.
We have a fairly large vendor concentration as well on fleet management for specialty fleets, on robotics and surveillance cameras. And I think the next verticals will enter will be probably healthcare devices, materials handling,
Okay.
and precision machinery.
I can definitely see an advantage there on the healthcare side. You
Yeah,
know, decisions have to be made. You have to be making quick. Mm.
exactly. Yeah,
So,
and yeah, and sorry, I
oh no,
interrupted
go
you.
ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that like the vendors that see like the value immediately are the ones that have, you know, like multiple sellers. The sellers typically don't really know how to talk about financing to the customers. So
Sure.
by using our tool, we abstract all that complexity from needing to talk about terms or needing to put documentation together or anything. All that is automated, right? So vendors that can really spend a ton of time enabling the sales force to use financing are the ones that adopt the fastest because the tool kind of like does the enablement for them.
Sure. Big, big helps out. I would definitely see it as a very good value add.
Yeah.
So I want to shift a little bit to kind of technology and trends since you're tech first and obviously helped you guys grow quite a bit. I mean, turning around a deal in 15 minutes is fantastic. So I guess as the CEO of a tech first organization, like what are you seeing out there from trends um,
Yeah,
going on? Obviously, AI is everywhere. That's probably
exactly.
another sidebar, but what are you just kind of seeing out there right now, Miguel?
I guess the overarching trend is AI, and before that was automation, right? But just how do you how do you reduce mistakes in the process or iterations in the process, let's say, and then how do you provide a better user experience both to the vendor and to the buyer? So all of our R&D, let's say, has been focused on automating qualification. So to the point that there doesn't even have to be an application filled in. Basically, just by how we embed ourselves in Salesforce, in the CRM, in the email of a vendor, of a seller, and so on, we can just pull the information about a buyer and in real time approve them, right? There's no interaction needed by the seller to get an approval, which means that a seller can go into a negotiation way before a deal has been closed or is about to close and know that they can lead with flexible payment terms, right? So that's been a big area of development so that you just remove that complexity and interaction. And then the other one has been to embed documentation, embed signing and evolve and so on, embedded within a single quote in an online platform, right? In a payment link. We call it payment link. So
Sure.
basically the vendor can just upload a final quote to a platform and that gets converted into the quote with the T's and C's attached, with the IPA or the EFA attached. And then that can be shared with the buyer in a payment link. And the buyer can just sign everything at once. And then that gets
Hmm.
automatically vaulted and shared with the different parties. So basically, it takes, like, I don't know, like 10 to 50 emails back and forth, between three parties into one
Sure.
smooth experience, right? So that's been kind of like it sounds simple, but it requires like a ton of work behind the scenes.
I don't think people realize this as much as what you said right now is almost like the end-to-end consumer
Yeah,
experience and how we deal with things as consumers.
yeah,
And people are just, oh, B2B, it's something going to be the same. And it's like not even close. Like what you
yeah,
just mentioned, that's a lot of R&D, a lot of development
yeah,
hours, a lot of
yeah,
time. But in the world that you're playing in, someone wants something, you know, you offer them financing right away,
yeah.
you're going to get that deal. All of a sudden they have to
Exactly,
come back or it's like, hey, I'll give you a call in a couple hours.
exactly, exactly,
Maybe it
exactly,
wasn't urgent. Maybe they don't need it.
exactly. No, and the reality, I mean, like you mentioned the consumer experience, right? The reality is that more and more so, both sellers and buyers are, I mean, are consumers. Like they expect the same experience in the day-to-day job than they do when they're buying something online, right? So that immediacy, that ease of use, that user experience, all that stuff is like table stakes for them, right? So um that's what we've done. Brought a consumer experience to a complex B2B sales process.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many people in equipment finance don't offer their customers or vendors portals
Yeah,
to log on and view and make a payment. They have to do a check. It's like,
exactly.
why? Why am I doing it? I don't want to do
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh, awesome. So when it comes to tech, leading edge or bleeding edge?
I think I mean, I think you mentioned like bleeding edge in the sense that it makes like more pain than
Well,
benefits.
well,
Is that what you're
no,
saying?
I
Yeah.
mean more like, you always have those, like, I guess the trailblazers who are out there doing the things first, and then you have kind of
Yeah.
like the fast followers.
Yeah.
So when I say bleeding edge, that's where it's like, okay, I like what I see on tech. It's almost like with some of these AI things that are coming out, where it's like, oh my God, we got to hurry up and get on that. It's like, dude, calm down. Let's calm
Yeah.
down. Let's automate some processes first before we turn over an AI engine into everything we do credit. So let's
Yeah.
scale back a little bit, little
Yeah.
steps. And that's what I just mean by bleeding edge, where it's like we're gonna go set the world on fire, and
No,
then
no, no,
all of a
no.
sudden it's like, yeah,
Then I would say leading edge, right?
yeah,
We are after all, working on transactions that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Like you just don't want to make a mistake and either like put the vendor or the buyer in a pickle and give
sure,
them a terrible experience, or just like lose a bunch of money because your AI agent made a stupid decision, right? So we first took the approach to automate, and now we're progressively deploying AI agents. But in any case, what the AI agents are doing is taking out the busy work from our operations team and from the users. They're not making any decisions or assertions on what is approved or not, for example, or on on making up documentation or anything, right? They're just like surfacing things so that humans can, instead of just, let's say, instead of require one person to approve, I don't know, 30 deals a day, now that person can approve 300. But it's not an AI
sure,
agent approving 300 and just like, wreaking havoc.
sure.
So yeah, it's
And that person still has to work hard and do a good job, because the agents,
100%.
and I think that's what people don't understand, where it's like, oh, like I can leverage this and it's going to make my job a lot easier. Well,
Yeah.
yes, but you still have to put in the work.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And then the other thing, I guess, is that ultimately it's not just about like substituting people, but really it's like about eliminating bottlenecks. So for example, like
Sure.
when it is the end of the month or the end of the quarter, no amount of people are going to be able to provide the experience to a seller that an AI agent can, right? Simply because an AI agent has infinite bandwidth. So then, like, if you get like, I don't know, like 100 applications in 30 minutes, instead of having a
Sure.
queue and then having to review them and so on, the agent is just going to be able to get back immediately, provide updates on the status and so on, in a way that a human could not do, right? Simply because of like a bandwidth or just like ability to type, perspective. So
Sure.
so yeah, that's kind of how we think about the technology and how and where we can innovate.
And being that you guys are all on your in-house systems, I guess what was the determining factor when it came down to, I mean, as a business owner, right? Do we want to build this or do we want to buy? Right. And I guess what was the leading
Yeah,
decision that you chose build over buying something else to do your
I
business?
think it's a really good question. So I would like to differentiate between um, components of our tech offering, and then, for example, like new products or new verticals. So in because it's like slightly different, right? In components of our technology, we've made a decision of whether to partner or build or buy, basically, depending on um, how uh, business critical the component of the tech was, and then how, like, if it is extremely critical and it kind of like becomes part of our IP, it's always going to be a build decision. If it has to be
Yeah,
very it has to be, let's say, very tailored to our way of operating, and something off the shelf does not allow that flexibility, and we can't really do what we need to do as a business because of some external limitation, then it's also going to be to build. If it's
yeah,
just like a matter of um kind of like a commoditized thing that nobody really cares about, there's no added value, and it's just like some automation, then it's just gonna be always buy, right? It's gonna give you like more time back, and accelerate you. That's on tech components. When we're thinking about new verticals, or new
Sure.
financial products, it's slightly different, right? Because in some cases, it's like, hey, if I were to enter, for example, equipment financing for healthcare devices, um, everything that I need to build to be able to do it from like a tech perspective, plus the money that it would cost me to acquire vendors to get to a material volume, that has a certain cost.
Sure.
If I'm go and buy a broker that's doing 100 million in financing per year in this space, that's another cost. So then it's like kind of like weighing, hey, what has more
Sure.
cost versus benefit, right? So it's like a slightly different approach.
Sure. Yeah. Cost benefit analysis is always very important. It's looking
Yeah.
at anything. That's for sure. Uh, well, thank you for walking me through that there.
Mm.
So I guess 5 years ago, what was the driving force into, I guess, getting into equipment finance?
Yeah, I guess it's having experienced the pain firsthand, right? Where when I was running the sales team at that software business, and every customer asked about paying monthly or quarterly, and we couldn't really offer that because we needed to recover our cost of customer acquisition, our development cost as quickly as possible. That was really painful because it was either like offer flexibility, which we wouldn't do, or lose a deal, right? And ultimately we just resorted to giving large discounts in order to close the deal. So that was,
It's a lot of work that goes in, man. I mean, I mean, I think we're always selling, right? But when you sit there and you work that hard for a deal and you can't get it because you don't offer financing or
exactly.
flexible payment terms, that's frustrating. I'm sure
It's
you
frustrating.
lose a lot of good people because they're just like, well, you guys aren't going to do it. I want to go find somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah, and it was literally that. Like, hey, I like your product, but if I have to pay up front, I'm not gonna buy it. So then,
Right.
yeah, then you say, okay, I'll discount, but then you discount, and then you're cutting your fees and your
There goes your
revenue.
commission. You just discounted your commission out
Exactly.
of the deal.
Exactly, your
Sorry.
commission and your growth for the next like 5 years, you're cutting it
Yeah.
by a discount percentage, right? So it's not a great solution either. So that pain just
Hmm.
stuck with us. We're like, hey, there has to be a way to solve this. Look, I get the customer's perspective too. It's like, hey, I'm gonna use this for the next like 5 years. Why should I pay up front? I get that as well, right? Like the
Yeah. No, I
customers, yeah. So like
one
somebody needs to come in and facilitate it for both parties. And that's
one
what we
hundred
did.
percent. And plus, it's like the whole premise of leasing and financing is to spread out your
Exactly.
cash flows and depreciation over time. I guess that's the one good thing if you buy it up front.
Exactly.
Just
Exactly.
you got all this depreciation. Anyway,
Exactly.
okay. And then I guess over the last 5 years, how's the market responding, Miguel, to your frictionless, kind of moving financing forward uh, model?
It's been incredible. It's been incredible. Like it took us a while to kind of get escape velocity. After all,
Okay.
it's like a complex, well, it's not a complex market, but it's a market that requires, you know, specific knowledge and requires a specific language and requires specific connections, right? So it took us a while to develop all of that. But then every user that closed deals with the product became an evangelizer immediately, right? So that actually like
Sure.
started to
Sure.
snowball and we would go, from doing a couple of deals with a vendor to doing a few hundred deals with a vendor, over the span of a year and so on. So like you could see all the vendor usage growing and growing and growing. So yeah, it's been incredible. And now we've started to partner with very large vendors providing, captive financing programs and so on, and everything is just accelerating. So we do see that we have a tech advantage, versus
Nice.
the traditional players, and it's like a very good place to be. When you just like are trying to keep up with what your customers demand, and suddenly you've opened the realm of possibilities, and then we're
Sure.
becoming a partner for payments and for non-finance servicing and for things like that, where we see that we can provide like an end-to-end tool to a vendor that's not just financing, like, and we are capable of doing that because we start by solving the financing problem extremely well.
Sure. No, it's fantastic. I guess my other question I have about like this industry, when it comes to, I guess, B2B or B2C, what do you see there? And why would you want to focus more on a B2B product?
So I, I like to focus more on B2B because one, it seems like way less competitive in a strange way. I mean, I say it, like there's a ton of competitors in equipment financing. You know about it, but like everybody follows the same playbook, right? And it still feels like very like manual and like offline workflows and so on. Consumer is much more flashy, right? Like you see, yeah, you
Sure.
see
Yeah.
Affirm, you see Klarna, and you see a bunch of innovation in consumer, right? That eventually will make it to B2B. It starts with consumer because it's easier to change a consumer's behavior than to change an organization behavior. Having said
Sure.
that, once you change an organization's behavior, it changes forever. It becomes like so sticky. If you can manage the change management, it becomes like extremely sticky and you have like an incredible loyalty. So I prefer to do B2B
Huh,
than the consumer. But yeah, like what we're doing is we're bringing the consumer experience to B2B. Like every B2B buyer, every B2B seller is also a consumer and they're expecting
sure.
the same kind of experience.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I said, this is my 20th year and took a pandemic for DocuSign to be like, you know, hey, what a thought process, right? Like, why can't we do eDocs? So we've been saying that
Exactly.
for like 15 years, man. Come on. Like, it's not.
It's really, that's the thing, right? In some cases, some players are working with technology from like 20 years, yeah, or more.
It's older. I think it's older than that. I mean,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I would
exactly,
say probably
exactly.
half the industry still probably runs off Excel, which is not bad. Excel's a
Yeah,
great program, but
yeah,
it's not gonna go down
exactly.
that forever. Um, so um, as you're continuing to look at your roadmap, I guess as an organization, what are some of the determining factors, Miguel, that you sit there and say, okay, let's do that. I want to make that investment because that's going to make our technology that much better. Or is it more of a, hey, this vendor is really pushing me to have this. Like if I don't solve this need for this vendor, they might look elsewhere.
Yeah,
So what determines, I guess, your roadmap, and then
yeah.
how do
No,
you just make sure you're doing the best? Because anything can be done with time and money, but like we went about before, why?
it's a great question. So we have kind of like a North Star company, right? Which is that we want to do more volume, of course. And we have a vision of how we think of how we think that, the levers that we pull will end up meaning more volume.
Uh,
And then we have a bunch of vendors that are deeply committed that give us ideas on how we can solve more pains for them. And they complain about things that are not working perfectly. And that gives us, like those two things give us a ton of input for the roadmap. So some things that we're working on that have been primarily vendor suggestions and vendor initiated is one, a tool to work with a reseller network. So we're working with some vendors that have thousands of resellers.
yeah,
So, resellers add their own margin to deals and there's not a lot of transparency with the vendors and so on. So how can we create a tool that is so valuable for resellers by embedding financing there and so easy to use, just like uploading a quote and that's it, that enables resellers to sell more, convert more, get paid faster, and is so valuable that they're willing to collaborate with the vendor in the same tool as a
mm,
let's say as a team, as opposed to kind of like two opposing companies, right? So that's something that we're seeing a lot of progress in. And the other one would be to sorry, like how do we enable sellers to how do we give them like a deal co-pilot that allows them to understand what is the optimal price for each buyer at each moment and at what terms, right? So not
mm,
just solving the financing aspect, but also actually like helping them with prioritization, pricing, presentation, and so on, all in favor of
sure,
helping a seller to close more and faster.
sure. Yeah, and that's all about data and information. Get it in front of them,
Exactly. It's all
show them
about
their
data,
options.
inference, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, and iterating. Yeah.
Perfect. Miguel, I ask everyone who comes on the program to give me a little fun fact about themselves. So, outside of your day to day working at Capchase, what else do you enjoy doing, man?
So I just love working on things that show progress, right? And I measure everything. So like that goes from like growing plants to riding bikes and seeing like the incremental progress in speed, power, etc. Just like measuring everything. Um, construction kind of like construction sets and so on, where you can just see the progress of like every additional piece. So I just like working on things and seeing things that grow, right? So yeah, that's kind of like the overarching narrative of my life.
Perfect. Perfect. That's fantastic, Miguel. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess my final question I have for you is why should someone want to do business with Miguel Fernandez and Capchase?
Yeah, because that person can rely on me taking decisions that benefit that person over benefiting my company. And we think that that is the way to build a business that will endure for forever, versus kind of like a pump and dump thing. So people can rest assured that any feedback they give us, any expectations they have will be uh, delivered and surpassed. So yeah, we're open for business. So happy to help anywhere.
Perfect. Well, Miguel, thanks for your time. Pleasure getting to know you and learning more about your history, and then more importantly, what you've been doing in Capchase over the last 5 years. Keep up the great work, man. Like I
Thank you,
said,
Jesse.
1.5, 90 employees and 1.5. I mean, did you think you were going to be there? You think you'd be where you're at when you started this 5 years ago?
Never in my wildest dreams. No. It's been
Well,
like crazy journey.
and an acquisition underneath your belt within 5 years. I mean, that's it's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's been quite a ride.
Oh yeah, great job, man. Look forward to seeing the organization grow and really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It was great to spend this time talking to you.
Okay, talk
All right.
soon. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.